No, wait a minute. Yeah.
We're live.
Good evening, everybody. This is the monthly board meeting of the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission. For those who might be joining us or watching it later, we'll just identify who we are and what we're doing. Board of Directors for the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission for our monthly meeting. So it's good to see you all here. We have our boardroom at Hemlock Knoll. We have 3 board members out there, Dennis, Annette, and Jim. And we have at the boardroom in the planning office, we have 2 board members, Carla and myself. And then we have our participants by phone and Faith and Wayne, and we have our participants by video as on the screen. So it's so good to see you all here. And I'll just note that we do have quorum because we have like 11 of us on right now. So quorum is 9, so we're ready to proceed.
Owner? I don't know who owner is.
Who's the owner? I don't know. They just tried to say something.
All right, we have someone logged in as owner. There's Terry. Who's on the phone as owner? Is that Terry?
Yep, hi.
Okay, hi Terry.
They're still
Are you logged in on 2 devices? Who's on as owner? I don't know who that is. I'm going to mute them, Hollis, just until we know who it is. Oh, there we go. Who is that?
Wayne.
Wayne Sturgeon?
Recording.
Yes,
Oh,
ma'am. Sorry about that.
that's
Oh,
okay.
oh, that was Wayne Sturgeon.
That's
Okay.
okay. We just like to make sure everybody, I'm just gonna rename you there on the video. Wayne Sturgeon from the island. Perfect.
Yes,
So we
ma'am.
do have quorum, and I don't know if we have any visitors actually watching us right now. Hollis might be able to tell us, but if we do, welcome. And if you're watching later, we welcome you as a visitor after the fact. At this point in time, we would need to ask any of the board members if they have a conflict of interest to please self-declare it at this time. And it would be relating to anything on tonight's agenda. If you have a conflict of interest, please self-declare. Any to note? None to note, so we'll proceed. We'd be looking at first for a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated to the board members in your board package. I trust you've all had ample time to look it over, so we're looking for a motion to adopt as circulated.
I move.
I'll make that motion.
Part, okay, and was that Faith that said second?
Yes, it was.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Any questions about the agenda that was circulated? Questions or discussion? None to note. We'll move to the question and we'll all on video in favor. If you're in favor, can raise your hands. Then let Claudette count them. Got everyone, Claudette? On video? Perfect. Then we'll just go to the phones. If you're in favor, just identify yourself. We only have Faith and Wayne, so either of the 2 of you feel free to speak up and say if you're in favor.
Yeah, favor.
Faith?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so we'll call for anybody contrary minded to adopting as circulated. Can stick your hand up, or if you're on the phone, you can speak up for sure. Any contrary minded to the adoption? None to note. The motion has carried and we have our agenda. The next item on the agenda would be the adoption of the minutes of the January 28th, 2021 meeting. Again, you all had them circulated in your board package and you would have had time to peruse them. So we would be looking for a motion to adopt as circulated.
I'll make an motion to adopt Annette.
Annette, making a motion to adopt. Thank you for saying your name, Annette, because it's sometimes hard to identify the various voices. Thank you for that. We have a motion. Seconded by Ken. Thanks, Ken. Appreciate that. Are there any questions or discussion about those minutes? Anything that you'd like to note? Any questions or discussion? None to note. We'll call for the vote on the screens. If you're in favor of adopting those minutes as circulated, please raise your hand. In the boardrooms, you can also raise your hand. Claudette. We've got our hands up. Now we'll go to Faith
Yes.
and then Wayne McCordy on the phone.
Yes.
Perfect. Any contrary minded that I may have missed? Any contrary minded to the adoption of the minutes? None to note. The minutes have been adopted. Thank you all. We don't have any business arising from previous meetings, but we do have a little bit of new business to jump into tonight. So that's the next thing on the agenda. And it's to do with our planning department and a new building inspection regulation that kind of caught them by surprise through no fault of their own. So Alex is with us and he's going to jump on and lead the discussion there. So thanks, Alex.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. So to the whole board, I just wanted to give a quick update about what's happening in the planning building inspection world that affects not just our region, but the entire province. So we knew about a year ago that the province was going to be adopting the Building Code Administration Act. A number of positive changes are included in this. It adopts the 2015, we were aware it would be adopting the 2015 National Building Code, so no surprise there. And we've, over the course of the year, have kind of been brushing up on some of those sections when we've had some free time. Good stuff in that regard. It changed from Department of Environment, Local Government, overseeing building inspections, to Department of Public Safety. So it's a brand new act, brand new department responsible, and they adopted new regulations to implement the act. So it's been on the books at the legislature for a year, as I said, but it's dormant until you have the regulation. The regulations where the rubber hits the road and really how it's going to work. And there was some surprises in it when it was announced to us 5 days after it was put into force. So we had a week there where we were actually working under a former regulation. And it was a bit disappointing, to say the least, that we were not notified even the day it was actually brought into force. So normally there's a 30-day comment period on regulations like that, and we wish there had been because the planning directors and building officials across New Brunswick have put together a bunch of things. I know of at least 19 points that are points of concern with the regulation as it's adopted right now. And we're going to be sending some correspondence as a professional association to the minister responsible. So that's Ted Fleming. There is, as I said, some positive things with the National Building Code 2015. For example, things like six-story wood frame construction, maybe a more possible, make some more affordable housing possible in some larger municipalities. It adopts things like the energy code. We're also dealing with something that was a bit surprising, but worth notifying as many people as possible. But we now have new standards for earthquakes in certain parts of western part of Charlotte County. So St. Stephen, St. Andrews, Oak Bay. This is in a new earthquake risk zone, and there's only 4 of these types of zones west of the Rockies, or east of the Rockies, apologies. So the other 3 are in Quebec, and we're the 4th one. So there was all kinds of code with bracing that we're now having to work with developers and contractors, and we just had a meeting with one of the large contractors in our region this morning to go through some of the changes that are required for bracing. So some of these things we're just going to be catching up on speed, getting up to speed on, and it's all normal. The things that aren't so normal and took us by surprise was the regulation. So the regulation was adopted with 0 exemptions for any structure. Now, when I say that, I mean every structure needs a building permit. There is still exemptions for structures 215 square feet or less that aren't being inhabited. So what it was is that in rural areas, if you're building a camp less than 625 square feet, that camp didn't need to meet code. You could build it in mill lumber, you could build it pretty much however you wish. You would just need a development permit, make sure you're outside of a highway setback, wetland, it matched the zoning. So pretty standard stuff that wouldn't require building inspections. Now everything needs building inspections. So what we're dealing with this is a very, very likely increase in building inspections. We already last year was a pretty unusual year for the amount of building. Our building permits went up by 53%. We had 598 permits last year that were issued out of this office. So if this year's anything like last year, that would be 598 permits that also all need inspections. Now that is an issue that I think Hollis has been working on and may address it at a later time. When it comes to the no exemptions from code, obviously, I think a lot of you around the table are thinking, well, what happens if I want to build a small garage and mill lumber? How do we do this? Well, we're doing our best to look at alternate solutions. So this is something you can do under code, and in part 9 of the code, you can adopt alternative proven solutions for different types of construction methodologies that are proven to work elsewhere. And so we're looking at different options for camps and small garages to make sure that the code requirements are reasonable. It may not be too onerous if we're looking at it the right way. At the same time, it may be advisable to perhaps consider bringing back some of these exemptions at a later date with an amendment to this regulation. So there could be an opportunity for the board to consider writing to the Minister of Department of Public Safety about it, but it's obviously a board decision and we leave it to you to discuss. So I think that concludes what I wanted to share. If anybody had questions, I could take some questions, but it's up to you guys in terms of timeline for this.
Why is it just in here and there's only 4 of them across Canada? It doesn't make sense.
Oh, the earthquake zone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
If I could address that.
Yes, please.
The earthquake classification that we're in right now had to do with geological activity. Like they measure this, and basically there's this little fault line that runs up the St. Croix River, and it's been, I guess, geologically active recently. So it put us just past the threshold where we need to start looking at bracing for buildings. So we have a map. We know if somebody applies for a permit and you're outside of it, you won't need to deal with it. So we're only applying it where it's absolutely needed, but it is a change for contractors.
Okay.
It's not as significant a change as you would think. It's really just that on your corner brace, and I'm not a technical expert on this, but from what I understand, it's only on the corner sheathing that you would need nails every 6 inches, for instance.
Okay.
Like it's more nails basically.
A little more structural support.
So yeah, and there might be some other mechanical ties that you have to put for.
Yeah, we put some information on our website for education purposes. You want to find out more, there's posts about it now on Facebook and on our planning website. So it can be done with not, as Paul said, not much. If you need to think about things a little differently, big open concept spaces, there could be issues depending on how large the building is, etc. So
Can I get a copy of that area?
sure, yeah,
Because that does affect my area.
yeah,
Definitely does.
definitely does, yeah.
And if I understand it correctly, the challenge stems largely from the fact you didn't have time to prepare. So it was announced to you folks on February 5th. And it affects every single citizen in the province, whether you're municipal or rural, because the inspections are the same regardless of where you live. And because it was kind of done retroactively, you could literally have contracts that were signed between builders and citizens that maybe now can't be built the same way they had actually contracted for. You might actually have something already under construction that all of a sudden no longer meets this new code.
Yeah, if it had received a permit under the, we were given, instructions that we can continue on with it, but there was a lot of projects in planning stages, some of which had to change. Some of it wasn't too bad and too onerous or different, but some things which, like the earthquake standards, definitely took some people off guard. I will also say, with municipalities, a good point, Madam Chair, the municipalities will have to amend all their building bylaws to match this. And there's fewer things municipalities can do in terms of municipalities will no longer be able to exempt things differently than the rest of the province. So that you have a year, if you're a municipality, to make your building bylaw match the regulation, or it's not valid. So that's something for municipalities to know. And the municipalities we're working with, we're going to be providing some bylaws for their councils to consider. And if anybody else is interested, we can share best practices. But
yeah, well, nobody likes being taken by surprise, especially something that big. So thank you, Alex, for the update. And as for the board, perhaps writing to the minister, it was a suggestion that we may want to do that. What would, from your perspective as the planning director, what would that letter best look like if we're to say this is what our planning office needs, or this is the concerns that our planning office has? What would be the content of that letter that you're thinking the board may want to consider writing?
If I may, Madam Chair, one of the concerns that I have voiced is that a lot of things that were development permits are now building permits. And when I look at the volume of work that we're doing, it's quite a bit different in a building permit because you've got a plans review and 3 inspections. So when you add up all the hours, tie it up into a building permit as opposed to a development permit, it's considerably more. So my concern is that I'm going to have to increase staffing for building inspection. Therefore, that throws our budget.
So what would the content of the letter be? Just to maybe amend the regulation to have a longer inception period? What I'm asking is, if there were a letter to be written from this board, what would we be saying?
My request would be that they went from 625 square feet to 20 square meters.
Mm-hmm.
My request would be that it goes back to the original size for exempt buildings. That would be, because that's like the majority of camps,
Right.
Things like that.
Garages.
Smaller buildings, garages,
Yeah.
things like that, right?
Yeah.
That would be my request.
Alex, is there anything
Yeah,
you would like to
I
add to
concur
that?
with that, and what we've discussed and what we've discussed with other officials is that would be a logical place to provide exemptions would be 55 square meters or less. So that's slightly different than what it was. So it'd be 592 square feet.
Right.
But in code, once you get over 592 square feet, that's when a bunch of things start kicking in. And to be honest, there was probably a bit too much lax on some of these extremely large garages that didn't have to meet code, where they may have not been stable. But we did not really see any evidence of any of these failing or people getting injured from these buildings either. So that, what I would say would be probably a sensible or reasonable approach would be to introduce an exemption up to, for structures habitable or not, up to 55 square meters.
Or 592 square feet, because that's when the other codes kick in.
And that's
Kind of lines up.
Yeah.
Okay. So it makes sense. So there's no overlap. You're not having something up to 600 and whatever it was, 625 square feet, but at 592 square feet, some other parts of code kicked in anyway. So
it would be a nice clean number
nice structure
and make sense with code.
Okay.
So that would be our recommendation to the board. The other one would be that if they do introduce amendments to the regulation, that they would be offered an opportunity to be consulted, because we could help them improve it. That's the goal. You know, we want to collaborate with Department of Public Safety. We don't want to work against them, but.
No, and I think the point to make is that you're the planning director. Southwest Emergency Service Commission is in the business of helping people with permits and making sure things are done properly. So it's in the best interest from your guys' perspective, I mean, of not doing something that would negate the whole reason this department exists or that these jobs exist. So it's not like you're trying to say, we don't need this. You're saying, let's work together to make it better, so that from our perspective of boots on the ground, plus what you're trying to achieve with public safety, can find that sweet middle ground, so to speak, that makes it work best for the planning directors, for the planning departments, for the citizens, for the municipalities, and for the province. And so I think that's so if there were to be a letter, if the board wanted to consider it and toss it around, there'll be an amendment to the regulation to revert or to change the new regulations so that anything up to 592 square feet would only require a development permit, similar to the previous regulation where anything up to 625 square feet is allowed in development. Am I understanding that correctly? Or?
Yeah, the development permit language is now gone. It's only building permits, but it would just be exempting the structures up to 592 from the application of code.
Okay.
So we'd still issue a building permit, but it would only require a development officer to review it and to issue it, as opposed to having the building inspector do a plans review, go on site, inspect it.
All right, so an amendment to exempt from the application of the code any buildings up to that number of square feet.
55 square meters or equivalent, which imperial equivalent.
592 square feet. I was taking my notes there. Is there anything else that because we're not involved in the planning as board members, so we wouldn't know what to ask unless we get your guidance. Or what we wouldn't know what to consider would be a better way to say it.
The only other issue that I discussed was the making sure we're consulted on the future amendments.
Right.
But
yes, and I think most of us sitting around the board table have been around long enough to be able to point to examples in times where governance of the province or the federal government has certainly, when something's come out, it's obvious that maybe there wasn't enough consultation with the boots on the ground. So if this is the case, I think we can definitely make the case for that, because as planning directors, I'm sure you don't, being taken by surprise on something this major is not, and it's certainly not good for the citizens of the region as well when it's thrown into quandary like that. So I think I would be certainly more than happy to ask for that to be considered in future amendments for sure. So we can, is there anything else, Alex, that you'd like to bring to the table?
There is one last thing, which was, I'm not sure how they're going to address it, but we need to make sure that, and it may be just a minor point, but we're looking to them to provide a solution to wiring permits and making sure that that is backed up with a regulation. Because right now it was in the regulation, it's not in the new one. They're still requiring it in power. We want to make sure it's backed up with the force regulation, because that's the number one compliance. We're making sure people, when they get hooked up to power, they get their building permit, they get their septic, they get these things. So that way we're not having to break down systems where somebody gets some permits, they don't get all the permits, and we see that that's always a problem. So we want to make sure these systems are working in conjunction, not separately.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be to make sure that there's a solution, a long-term solution for the wiring permit that has force of regulation.
Which right now would be power as sole.
It's more in their discretion and guidance documents. Yeah.
All right.
It's weakened it.
It used to be a requirement. That requirement was removed. NB Power is still doing it, but there's nothing requiring them to do this. And what that means is if somebody builds something and then they call NB Power to get hooked up, they're not required
To show those other permits
show a building
in order to
permit,
get
right.
that done.
Yeah.
NB Power can just hook it up.
Yes,
So it kind of,
they're not.
they're not, but they don't, they could, if they wanted to, they could just ignore it and just hook it up.
Yes.
Okay, all right. All right, definitely something for the board to consider. Is that, Alex, you good?
That's good.
Alice, you good with that? All right, thank you, Alex, so much. It's always a pleasure to have you join us. Are there any, if you want to stick around, Alex, just for a second, in case there's any questions, as we do have to turn it to the board and ask if there are any questions or discussion for you or things that you could answer. So with that, Alex saying he's done his presentation, I'll open it up to any board members to ask questions or provide input on what Alex and Hollis have updated us on. Is there anything, any questions? No, pretty straightforward. Okay, we can certainly, if anybody wanted to say we could draft a letter, we could, or we can just bring it back under business arising under the next board meeting as well. But to give people time to think about it, but definitely we'll bring it back, see if there's any appetite for discussion.
Oh.
Thank you, Alex.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, board members. All right, so with no questions for Alex, I believe he's departing the scene. Have a wonderful evening, Alex.
I could stay to the end if there's questions from the public, but I'll leave that to, if you think it's all right.
That's all right.
Okay.
I don't
There
think
is
there's
anything
anybody
moving
watching
forward.
us
Oh, okay.
right now in real time. All right, so with that done, we'll move on to the committee and staff reports. The first item on the agenda is the executive director's report. Always Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My report is in your packages, but for the benefit of the public video, I'll just briefly touch on some of it. So solid waste, we are pretty much tracking on par with where we should be. There's no surprises. Nothing out of the ordinary there. Things are going on well at the at Hemlock Knoll facility. It's been a mild winter, so we haven't even had to plow a lot of snow. So, but we're gearing up for, it's going to be a busy construction season. At planning, we weren't sure, and again, this goes back to what we were just talking about with the new building permit regulation. We weren't sure how permits were going to go this year because last year was such a boom. It appears so far this year that there is no sign of slowing down. We are exactly where, well, you can see the 2021 compared to January 2020 permits there, the graph in my report there. So I'm not 100% sure where it's going because building supplies are about 3 times what they were a year ago in terms of cost, but it doesn't appear to be slowing anybody down. There's little to no vacancy in buying houses, so maybe that's driving a lot of it. Not sure. Anything could happen, I guess, over the next few months. But so, as I said, as I alluded to earlier, we have the ability to increase capacity in our building inspection department without actually hiring anybody new. I can do this through internal movement succession. We can be a little flexible with some personnel. Again, I've played that one by years ago. Other news. So last month we had the RCMP give their presentation to the board, and they promised to send out a survey for priorities for RCMP. She get a hold of me looking for everybody's contact email for the board, which I gave to her because she wanted to send those out directly. I don't know if anybody's received anything. No, okay. I'll follow up with her then. Internal documentation reorganization project, our QMS system, it's underway. We're putting in a lot of the fundamentals now, and the end results are really going to make a huge improvement in both efficiency, especially for this office, for this planning office, in terms of the processes that we go through, as well as a lot of efficiencies at the solid waste facility as well. Along those lines, we've also now implemented, it's a web-based equipment maintenance program at the solid waste facility. So we're tracking every piece of equipment, what maintenance goes on each one, how much fuel each one uses, the hours on each one, just a whole comprehensive tracking system. I think that's going to be really helpful going forward for management. Other thing is our network's operational at Hemlock Knoll, and so we're starting to see more and more benefits from that. The camera system, as you know, but we're now tying in all of the wastewater treatment system. Eventually we'll end up with a full bore SCADA, which will help us manage a lot of that much more easily, be able to head off disasters before they become big disasters. But also we're going to be able to gain some efficiency. So I've tasked some of the staff out there with looking at, once we get these things in place, to look at demand control, like electrical demand control, that type of thing, to control the electric bill. Basically, I mean, it cost, I think it was $10,000 just to blow air into the ponds last year. So there's a lot of opportunities, I think, for some efficiencies that we're going to now start to be able to realize much better. And that is my report, Manager.
Thank you. Are there any questions from any board members for Hollis about his report? Or anything he's mentioned in it? No questions? Okay, and strategic plan update, and that's all again Hollis, and I think you touched on a lot of it in your actual report, executive director's report.
I did. So yeah, that's included in your package as well. I did touch on a lot of it. A couple of the other things that were in our strategic plan, a lot of it had to do with public, not public consultation, but
Public
more
awareness.
public awareness and things like that. Some of that has been accomplished with this new, especially with the Recreation Resource Hub website, which was launched, and some other updates that we've done publicly, communications. That'd be the other thing that I didn't touch on in my report. That would be part of the strategic plan updates. While we're on strategic plan, though, I just want to mention this here, that there's a lot of boxes, there's a lot of things that we checked off on the strategic plan over the last year, as you can see here. I think soon, maybe after elections, I'm just going to drop this out there, that we should maybe think about coming back to strategic plan and looking at it again to see if there's new things or what the board, where the board wants to go, especially when we have new board members.
Definitely, and I mean, maybe the executive committee would want to put that on before the board meeting actually, because there could be a significant changeover, and it would be nice to have the people who implemented it be able to honestly evaluate it and look at from their experience. So it may come to us sooner, may come out after the elections, because when we have our AGM in April, our annual general meeting, we won't be able to meet again until June, because we aren't able to hold any board meetings until the, I'm not sure what the correct word is, it's gone from me just like that, but when our mayors and deputy mayors are sworn in, they become automatically part of this board, whoever they may be, and we can't meet again as a service commission board until those people are all sworn into office, until their oaths have been made. So after our AGM in April, we won't be meeting again until June. So we may see that what Hollis mentioned about the strategic plan review. It is good to review it annually. I'm a big fan of that, and so we may see it sooner, we may see it after, but you can be sure we'll be seeing it. So is that it, Hollis, or is there anything else on that?
That is my report, Manager.
Perfect. Are there any questions for Hollis about the strategic plan update? No?
Quite a bunch to me.
Perfect. You are a quiet bunch tonight. Okay. It's been a long year, hasn't it? We're approaching the one year mark of 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and it's been an exhausting year, I think, and the learning curve from everybody having to switch to online meetings and things, and it's just I think we need a quiet board meeting now and again. Regional Collaborative Committee report. Terry James, Mayor of Blacks Harbor, she's the chair of that committee, and so I'm going to turn that over to Terry.
Great. Hi. This committee did meet on February 11th virtually. A summary of our activities. Actually, the recreation implementer, Sherry Stewart and Hollis Bartlett, did a presentation discussion, led a discussion on the recreation policy and the cost sharing. And part of that discussion was that Sherry and Hollis and St. David had met with St. David LSD to answer questions. A new draft of the proposed cost sharing policy was circulated before the meeting. Sherry did an overview of that new policy. Discussion on sending the draft to the board by March with the following revisions. And they were, one, changed the word facility to funded asset. Also change section 6.1 to reflect approximately 2 cents. And finally, change section 6.11.1 to state that the commission may recommend to the minister for an increase.
Alrighty.
Also,
Yes, I'm muted. Leave me alone.
the recreation website update was given by the Sherry Stewart, the recreation implementer. And I just wanted to advise that notice of motion. Please be advised that there will be a motion at the next March board meeting to adopt the regional recreation master plan policy. And that concludes my report.
Are there any questions for Terry about the report? Hollis, yeah, oh, Dick, yeah. Oh, you're muted,
He's muted.
you're muted. You're not muted on Zoom, but perhaps it's,
I'll phone in.
no,
Nope.
no, that's good, I hear you now,
Whoop,
I hear you now, yep,
can you hear me now?
yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry. I just wanted to know if this is the right time to recommend an amendment to the policy while we're discussing it now before it's brought forward for motion in March.
I believe that it was, those are minor wordsmithing amendments. Am I correct?
No, sorry. I would like to make another recommend another amendment. And is this a good time to do that? Or should I wait for the?
I think I think there's a little bit of confusion there because there's not a motion in front of us. That was that was the discussion of committee. That was just the committee report saying that when they send that draft motion to the board, they had one already kind of formatted in committee, and then the committee made these amendments that will be part of the notice of motion coming to the board. So we're not actually voting on it tonight.
No, I realize that. I was just, all I was saying was, should I introduce my thoughts on another possible amendment now, or just wait till March when the notice of motion comes?
I
I
think
would
maybe it
say,
might,
I would be open to receiving that just in advance so that the document is complete. So if you
Yeah.
have something, Mr. Isabel, certainly please say, and I'll write it down.
Okay, great.
yeah, my recommendation would be to, put it in an email, and you can send it to me if you like. And I'll make sure it gets to Terry, or you can send it directly to Terry, copy me, just so that we know that, so that we have the actual wording correct in whatever it is you want to put in as the amendment to have discussed. And then that committee is going to meet again before the board meeting anyway. So,
What is it, Dick, that you were, Terry said, I mean, we can discuss anything after a report is made. We can certainly give comments and about a report. So what is it that you were wanting to say?
Good. Okay. Thank you. Really, all it is for section 6, which is the cost share administration section. Really, I mean, I'm a great supporter of the cost sharing model that is proposed within the policy. In all the years that I was a chief administrative officer in a municipality, we spent lots of time talking about cost sharing for recreation. And I think we're definitely moving in the right direction here with this policy. That said, I represent the rural community of Campobello Island. And one of these things does not look like the others when you look at how the zones are created. And that is simply because Zone 7, Campobello Island, only has a single local government unit. It doesn't have like all the others, at least one municipality and one local service district. So the cost sharing administration approach doesn't really work for Campobello Island, because they would simply be handing money in that would be all handed back to them, because there's no second, there's no local service district that they have to take into account, for example. So I would be looking for a statement in Section 6 that simply to say that Section 6 doesn't apply to Zone 7 due to the fact that there's only one local government unit in the zone. That's just a thought. And it, I think it's important to acknowledge that again, there's no point in collecting 2 cents on the assessment to then just hand it all back to a single rural community local government. Okay, thanks for the opportunity to share that.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any, Terry?
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask if there was any other questions or comments about the report. Terry, did you have anything else to add about your report? Certainly, Phil.
No, I'm just thinking a mile a minute here. Just I'm trying to recall how we designated Graham and Ann and that. And
that's certainly something that we'll probably have Sherry at the board meeting when there's notice of motion as well, to answer those questions, because perhaps that has been.
I think that there was special consideration given to the islands, but right at this moment, I can't, articulate what it was. Hollis, do you recall?
I'd have to go through it again.
Yeah, I can't.
To find out, but.
Doug, I'll get you, Doug Nish, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, my only suggestion is it's not for discussion tonight. It should be referred to the committee, and that committee can meet next month before we bring that before the full board at the end of March.
Yep, and we will, and we'll bring solid answers for our island partners.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Terry.
Oh, Dennis is looking for.
Dennis, oh, sorry, I can't see the hands in the boardroom. My apologies, Dennis. Go ahead.
Just a question there on the motion here next month. Is that to vote in the 2 cent?
No.
No.
That's that would be a motion to adopt the policy, which would refer to the 2 cents, but the budget component would still have to be voted on separately. So regardless of policy, it would not be adopted until it's in the budget for 2022, is my understanding. So voting on the policy, but voting on the policy does not lock us in beyond a budget. It doesn't force us to vote on a budget if things were to change, and a policy can always be rescinded or amended as well. So does that answer your question, Dennis, or am I missing? Dennis?
Good.
Did that answer your question?
Good.
Perfect, thanks, Dennis,
Yep.
Appreciate that. Anything else? I don't want to miss anybody, I can't always see every hand. Perfect, all right, we'll go on to, thank you, Terry, for that. We'll move on to bylaw committee report, and Jim Tubbs, one of our LSD chairs, is the chair of that committee, so Jim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The bylaw committee met on February 9th, and there's a summary of that meeting in your packet. We also met again on Tuesday of this week, and at that point in time, we believe we have concluded all the changes that we wish to make to the bylaws. It will be in a new format. It will be in a consistent format throughout, which is something that it wasn't before, so it's going to make it easier to read. We'd like to take a week to look at the final draft, and after we look at it one last time. We would like to send it out to all the board members so that they would have time to look it over before we discuss it at the board table. The plan is to have a presentation of the amendments at the March meeting, and to put forth 30 days notice for adoption of the changes at the that would happen at the April board meeting. And I think that's all I have to report right now. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions for Jim about his report? None to note. All right, thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. We'll move on to the Finance and Audit Committee report. And unfortunately,
There should be a human resources.
oh, sorry, I missed the Human Resources Committee report. Thank you for that catch. I skipped right past it. Human Resources Committee report, and Wade Greenlaw is the chair of that committee. And he was unable to be here tonight, obviously. So it is in your board package, the report. Largely the work of the last meeting was just to make sure we're looking at the HR manual for the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission, just tidying up again, making the format easy to read, making sure that everything that relates to a topic is in the proper place, because some of it was a little bit disjointed, making sure that what's in the HR manual matches what's being done in practice, because some changes were made that didn't necessarily get updated. So I am not giving the report, but I know from what was in it. And Hollis, is there anything else that should be noted from your, since Wade can't be here?
Just my review.
Just your review about the changes to the planning.
Yeah, and Wade had sent me an assessment form, which I think is going to go to board members to want me to fix it. Executive director.
Assessment. Okay, the performance evaluation for the executive director is that time of year again. And so that will be coming out to board members as well. That's another thing that we'd like tidied up before the April board meeting. So when Wade gets that out to you, certainly he would like 100% participation. So certainly when you see that pop into your inbox, make sure that you take the time to help us get that tidied up. All right, and then we'll move on to Finance and Audit Committee report. And Winston had to unexpectedly give his regrets that he can't be here as well. The report is in your package. And Hollis, do you want to just kind of update them on what happened, because you are the staff member assigned to that?
Sure. So at our Finance and Audit Committee meeting, we had Jeff Mitchell from RBC Securities give us an update on our investments for our closure fund. Shockingly, we did well in 2020, and it's just because of the way it was designed, the mixture of it, and as some GICs were expiring, he was able to pick up some other securities at very low cost because of the stock market was down at that particular time. Anyway, we ended up at 4.5% gain for 2020, which is not bad. We are going to be going ahead with withdrawing about $700,000 out of the closure fund because it was overfunded. So Jeff is helping us with that, and with the way he's got a system there so that as certain things expire, we're able to take advantage of that and withdraw that money. Claudette presented some information about if we increase deductibles on property liability insurance policies. Winston suggested this be discussed with the board. I agree. So currently we have a $10,000 deductible, which is low, I feel. But if we increased our deductible to $25,000 for property, it would save us $3,600 and change a year in premiums. If we increase that deductible to $50,000, there's a savings of close to $8,000 a year on premium. For liabilities, if we increased our deductible there to $25,000, we save $750, and if we increase our deductible to $50,000, we save $1,500. So I'm just gonna leave that there for now. We won't discuss it right now until this report is done, but I'd like some feedback from the board on that. The last thing was we had our audit team was in place, and the audit team was there at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting. They went over the plan of action and how they were going to proceed with the whole audit. And then there was a part of that meeting that I was kicked out of, so which totally valid.
Way it goes every year.
Yeah. So yeah, that would be the financial report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Hollis. Are there any questions and I was at that meeting, and I believe Dennis was at the meeting as well. And the people who were there are all listed there. Ken was there as well, Doug Nash. So we can certainly, between us, answer some questions you may have, not as the chair of the committee, but if you have questions, particularly about what Hollis brought up about the deductibles on the commercial policy that we have and that we are paying for, certainly we'd be willing to take some questions or discussion on that. Anybody have any thoughts? Yes, Sam?
It sounds like the right direction to go in as far as I'm concerned.
Pardon me?
It sounds like it's the right direction to go in as far as I'm concerned.
Deductibles to find some savings?
Yeah.
If we were struggling for cash on a monthly basis, it would be a lot more risky. If something happened that you had to pay out a large amount, but that's not our position. So if we raise the deductible, we've never put a claim. So if we raise the deductible, we're still safe.
Yes. So really, whatever deductible you choose, a good rule of thumb is be comfortable paying out twice that amount before you'd be willing to put in a claim. So if you're talking a $50,000 deductible, realistically, you'd be looking at a claim having to exceed $75,000 to $100,000 before you'd submit an insurance claim. And certainly if in a situation like that arose, it would come back before the board anyway, regarding how to make that work in the finances. But finding the savings is good when you look at the two figures. If there was a $50,000 deductible on the property insurance portion, the savings of $7,971, and then you look at the liability portion, savings of up to $1,500. You could be looking at a total savings by refunded premium of $9,481 this year. But the minimum you'd be saving is about $4,300 if you took the lower deductibles. $4,300 is not a lot in a $5 million budget, but savings is savings, and it's definitely always good to look at saving money.
I've checked with the other regional service commissions that operate landfills, because those would be relevant, they'd be similar operations. Vast majority of them have $50,000 deductible.
Yeah, 10,000 is very low on a commercial policy this size. No further questions or discussion? All right. Then the last thing on there was the financial reports. And again, Winston is not here to present those, but they are in your package. And if you have any questions about them, you can certainly reach out after the fact, after the board meeting, and ask any questions you may like clarification on. But I'll turn it back to Hollis because he is the staff member assigned to this committee, and he can give us, and as the executive director, of course, he's very in tune with it. So Hollis, can you just give us the brief rundown?
Yep, so the report that you have in your package is not the actual financial reports, because Mark is still involved with year end and audit and everything else. So instead, I think I did this last year too, it's a budget report. So I'm reporting the actual expenses versus what we budgeted. And the budget, but it's important to remember the budget is the annual budget divided by 12. So there's going to be seasonal fluctuations on stuff. So some stuff that looks really good or really bad might not be. In general, though, I mean, it looks like we're running a big surplus right now, but that's just because we haven't spent a lot of money yet that we're planning to. But generally speaking, there's nothing that I see that concerns me in terms of what's happening. There's no big unexpected expenses that are sinking us. Our revenue is staying where it's supposed to. Our foreign waste is certainly doing well. It's on trend, same as it has been, same with Western Valley. So nothing out of the ordinary to report.
And nothing out of the ordinary as far as seasonal fluctuations to this point?
No.
Perfect. Any questions? I guess you'd have to direct them to Hollis this time, but any questions about those financial, pardon me?
Yes.
Dennis?
I have one question. Dennis here, I have a question.
Go ahead, Dennis.
On the sale of recyclables, is that still gonna be carried on like it did before for the containers? That's all it is, right?
Yeah, it's just, sometimes we bundle up a lot of extra cardboard, and that's generally what that is. We'll continue to do that too.
That's the only recyclables that wouldn't go to the recycling facility, is that correct? The sale of recyclables is only the stuff that you sell directly
That's right.
from the landfill, stuff that doesn't.
That's right. Every so often we get a bunch of it in and we just bundle, because we still have the baler.
Right.
And so we bail it up and we still receive money. I think where you're going, Dennis, though, is we still are receiving money for pop bottles. We still get that. And because they are still leaving the way that they used to be. That was one of the hiccups with going to Woodstock, but it turned out it wasn't a problem.
Okay,
So
and the milk jugs as well?
milk as well, yeah.
Okay,
So we still get that, but that doesn't show up as sale or recyclables. That shows up as other revenue.
Other revenue, but the sale of recyclables is stuff that's diverted from the truckloads that we send to the recycling facility and stuff that the Hemlock Knoll facility itself sells, or the Southwestern Universal Service Commission sells as a little bit of source of revenue. Perfect. Any other questions? And if I miss your hand, if you're in a room, it's certainly not intentional, so just speak up and give me a holler. Any other questions or comments? Does that conclude the financial report, Hollis?
That concludes.
Thank you.
Very good.
So at this point in time, we'd be setting the date and time of next regular board meeting per standing motion. It is the 4th Thursday of every month. It's going to be early in March, toward the earlier end, March the 25th, 2021 at 6 p.m. Multi-format board meeting as usual. And there's next March, just if you're planning your calendar, you won't be getting out early at the March board meeting. We're already tentatively setting the agenda as executive committee, and it's going to be a heavy one. So certainly mark out probably your full 2.5 hours or so for that board meeting, just as advance warning. So unless there's a motion to change it, that's standing motion. And be at 6 p.m. Right, with that being said, we do need to move on to the point in time where we have questions and answers with the public. And of course, because they're not in the room with us, we do have to use alternate means. Hollis, are there any questions on YouTube or on Facebook?
I don't have any questions emailed to me. We do have some viewers, but
no questions?
No questions at this point in time.
Okay, so with that being said, if you're watching later and you're a member of the public and something has triggered a question, fire off an email to the Service Commission and we'll try to answer it after the fact, and either in an email reply or in public session. I say that they came in after the board meeting and we'll try to address it. We're certainly not trying to exclude any questions by any stretch of the imagination. So with that being said, you know what we're looking for, Dennis? Motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
It's been great seeing you all. Have a wonderful remainder to your week. There's only one day left and have a